Best part about this, though, is that they did, like analysis, they did polls, and they were recognizing that they were struggling with white men in America because they didn't have a masculine face in their party. And the experts in their party genuinely believed that Tim Walz was that masculine voice that could help win those voters. This wasn't and the Washington Post, I remember they came out with this piece. It was one of the most incredible pieces. It was headlined, "Conservatives are terrified of Tim Walz's masculinity."
Right.
And so we were thrilled when they chose Tim. And every day he was just able to give us some great material. His gesticulations when he went on stage were always so flamboyant and feminine. The way he spoke, the way he looked, like he was just great. Speaking of meme material, he was so memeable in a negative way, where all the, JD gave us meme moments too, but in very positive ways. And so Tim Walz was the gift that kept on giving. And I'm so grateful that he's not going away and just living in an igloo in northern Minnesota for the rest of his life.
He's got jowls, sort of. He looks like a football coach. So I think they saw pictures. They're like, that's our guy.
Well, he was so he claimed to be the defensive coordinator, but he was like, he wasn't able to because he had a DUI. He wasn't able to coach in the state of Minnesota as a legal coach. So he was like an assistant coach to the So his coaching credentials are something that we question greatly because we think that's a big lie.
Was he coaching about the time Kamala was working at the McDonald's? Or is it a different timeline?
No, I think it's about the same time. They're about the same age. And that was another thing for me. It was like, they're like, Kamala Harris is a young voice and a young, she's 60. Yeah. And I'm like, 60's still young. They say 60's the new, but they acted like Kamala was like a 35-year-old, fresh face. But, she's only 15 years younger than Trump.
Boy. So we got to talk about Tim Walz, a.k.a. Tampon Tim, a.k.a. Tim Sugar Walz, because Tim Sugar Walz is embarrassing himself once again because, in my opinion, I believe this man is extremely insecure about his masculinity, okay? And this is why he tries so hard to be a manly man, right? He's trying to prove himself.
You got to respect people you disagree with, and you can't just dismiss people. This
How do you fight it?
This notion
I think
of
I could kick most of their ass. I do think that if they want to do it. I know I can outrun them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing.
No, but it's a natural reaction. I think it's one of the reasons we're losing so many men. And again, it's multi-ethnic. It's not just white men. We're losing them. We're losing them to these guys online. We're losing them people that I'm bringing on this podcast as well. That's why I brought.
These are bad guys, though. These are bad guys.
But they exist, and we could deny they exist. They exist. Not only they exist, they persist, and they're actually influencing young kids every single day.
How do we push some of those guys back under a rock?
I think we have to first understand what their motivations are. I think we have to understand what they're actually doing. And
you don't
I think
that's
important.
Racism and misogyny?
I think there's a lot of that, but I don't think it's exclusively that. When you talk to a guy like Steve Bannon, he talks about working folks, and he talks about how we hollowed out the industrial core of this country. I understand that. But we can dismiss the notion of election denialism. We could completely dismiss what he did on January 6th, but I don't think you can dismiss what he's saying. Reminds me a lot of what Bernie Sanders was saying. Reminds me a lot of what Democrats said 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, seeing that, you heard that. Tim Walz, he is the gift that keeps on giving for the Republican Party and for commentators like me, right? Tim Walz deciding to stay around instead of retiring and never being heard from again is one of the best decisions that the Democrat Party has ever made for Republicans, which means that it is a bad decision for them because this guy does the exact opposite of what Democrats want him to do, which is to essentially get white guys on board with the Democrat Party, right? As Tim Walz is going to admit in this interview at the Harvard Kennedy School that he is a DEI hire, that Kamala Harris picked him as a DEI pick to get white guys on board with her campaign. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I'm a team player. I'm with it. And there's folks that I recognize are smarter than me. They analyze this. You put your input in. Running a campaign that had never been run before, 100 days, in the situation we were at, running against a very unusual opponent on the other side. Mm-hmm. And look, my job was to do it. Look, I knew I was on the ticket I would argue because we did a lot of amazing progressive things in Minnesota that improved people's lives. But I also was on the ticket, quite honestly, because I could code talk to white guys watching football, fixing their truck, doing that I could put them at ease. I was the permission structure to say.
This dude said he could code talk to white guys who watch football and fix their truck. Wow. Incredible. This dude is so out of touch. It's unbelievable. He's such a tryhard. He really, really, really wants to prove that he's a manly man, right? And the funny part about it is that he's doing a terrible job, right? The more this dude talks, the more men run away from the Democrat Party, right? First and foremost, the dude is a progressive. The fact that Kamala Harris thought that picking a progressive man, okay, which means that by definition, you're picking a man that is of low testosterone levels, right? That or not straight, right? So it's like, okay, you're putting out a guy that, again, is either not straight or has low testosterone, right? You're putting that guy out there as a representation of the Democrat Party and trying to appeal to normal men. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. This is why Tim Walz was turning off men, right? Turning off men because men looked at Tim Walz and said, yeah, I don't want to be like him. That's not a representation of me, right? But see what Democrats, the way they think, because they think with their identity politics. And I'm glad that President Trump didn't fall into this trap because a lot of people told President Trump basically to do the same thing. Oh, well, he has to pick a so-called person of color, right? It has to be a black guy. It has to be a woman, right? A lot of people that were considered checked an identity box. And I am glad that President Trump chose not to fall for the trap of saying, okay, I need somebody that checks an identity box in order to appeal to a group of people. He chose J.D. Vance, who is another white guy, right? And, you would think that President Trump would have enough of the white guy vote, right? That he would, say, you know what, maybe I should try to get, this vote or that vote through identity politics. And he chose not to do it. And he chose J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance has been a pleasant surprise, right, in regards to how he has performed since he was picked, okay? So, yeah, I mean, when you look at his strategy, I personally think that it is outdated. It is also low-key kind of racist, right, to assume that the best way to appeal to people is not through your policies and your agenda and what you want to do for the country as a whole, but through racial identity, sex, gender, politics. Yeah, I think that we got to move on past that because it's divisive. And on top of that, I would argue that nowadays, I don't think it necessarily gives you an advantage, especially if you make it obvious that a person is being picked because of identity rather than competence. I think that's part of the reason why Kamala Harris had such a hard time gaining the trust of the American people and getting people's votes is because I think everybody kind of knew that she was picked because she was black, right? Not because she was extraordinary, but because she checked the identity boxes, right? I mean, these are the people that just a couple years ago, they were hard pressed to say that Kamala Harris should take over for Joe Biden, right? None of these people were Team Kamala until they had to be, okay, when she became the Democrat Party nominee because they didn't really have any other choice at that point because they decided to rig their own primaries. So when you look at what happened with Tim Walz, I think that Democrats were thinking that, okay, we need a white guy. We need a guy to appeal to white guys, but to be a softer answer to Trump, right? In the sense that Tim Walz is the safe white guy, right? He's the white guy that it's okay to be, right? The white guy that is feminine, that is submissive, that defers to women, right? Like, that's the type of white guy that a lot of these far left women want to promote because that's what they're comfortable with. These are the type of men that are going to let them have power and control.
I do want to take this outside of politics briefly. There's something to me really important about seeing someone like this modeling a different kind of masculinity that we just haven't seen. And I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit in the NFL with the Kelseys and Dan Campbell, this idea that big, tough football guy isn't separate from showing emotions and empathy and that kind of thing. And I when I see them leading with, because Kamala, dude, yes, they're calling him coach and whatnot, but in the same breath, they're emphasizing this man, the year he was a football coach, also ran the Gay Straight Alliance at the high school. That's really powerful in a way that goes far beyond politics and electability, which is what the discussion we're having. There are very few models of like that in American public life.
Ism trying to own masculinity in the most regressive sort of misogynist way possible. J.D. Vance lecturing everybody on, what a family means, what it means to be a man. Donald Trump obviously has his own version of manhood. To see Tim Walz out there as a man who is just joyfully embracing his role as the potential vice president to the nation's first female president is 2024.
And by the way, and I love that you're saying that, because this is about modern masculinity.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the Democratic Party, the coach that is saying that it's important for him as the football coach to be the faculty, partner for the LGBTQ
Gay
club,
Straight Alliance.
The Gay Straight Alliance. And he's like, that's something important for me to do, because if a coach is doing it, it's going to have just a little more salience, right? And it's going to help kids not get bullied. I mean, what's really been fascinating is to watch the men of the Democratic Party model a kind of masculinity that is simply 21st century masculinity.
Speaking of
it has been noteworthy to see how they are learning about what to do and how to confront Donald Trump as the opponent to a woman, 2016 and now. Very different campaigns, very different female candidates. But they are doing so in trying to put forward male figures, Tim Walz being one of them, Doug Emhoff last night, who can speak to men out there who might not be the sort of testosterone-laden, gun-toting kind of guy who wants to listen to Hulk Hogan and the kind of players that came out at the RNC, or might want to listen to that, but also, in addition, understand that it's okay in 2024 to be a man comfortable in his own skin who supports a woman.
Yeah, so again, Democrats want Tim Walz to be the beta man, right? And for whatever reason, the geniuses, the liberals are running the DNC, the Democrat Party, beta men, think that beta men or putting beta men out there is going to attract normal men, right? When that's just simply not the case. And Tim Walz is not smart enough to understand that his brand of masculinity, which really is just submission to women, right? That's basically what it comes down to. Being submissive to women, okay, is something that men want. And that's not what men want. That is the exact opposite of the nature of a man, okay, and what a man seeks. You're actually trying to remove a man from his proper place, which causes chaos and dysfunction within society, right? That's one of the reasons why our country has become so ass backwards on social issues, is because men have been taken out of their proper place, right? They've been taken out of their proper roles as men. And again, that leads to chaos and destruction. I think that Tim Walz is a representation of that.
Say, look, you can do this and vote for this. And you look across those swing states, with the exception of Minnesota, we didn't get enough of those votes.
But you could be giving them permission on TV every day. You could have been messaging that way, and that isn't necessarily how it shook out.
Well, yes, but I also said I understand myself. I said I think I'll give you pretty good stuff, but I'll also give you 10% problematic. And so somebody's got to make the decision here to handle some of this stuff and to make it. And those are just decisions that were made. And I think after the fact, it is not second guessing or anything. I think it's fair to go back on and look at this. Look, we had the most qualified person who'd run for president in this country's history at the top of the ticket. That in itself should have got this thing won. We had, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, I think history will prove me right, a very unqualified person on the other side. And you have to determine, how do you get those hits? What was the best way? Did it make sense to continue to, call him weird or call that out, or make this pitch that we are significantly different and our policies can improve your lives? And there's people that make those decisions, and whether it's right or wrong or not, I guess history will make that.
You know what's so hilarious about this dude? He's so dumb. And honestly, I cannot believe that this man is the same dude that thought it was a good idea to call Republicans, President Trump, J.D. Vance, weird, right? You guys remember that? It seemed like so long ago Tim Walz was calling Republicans weird. Well, they're weird. And the mainstream little media was repeating the talking points, right? Just repeating the talking points. And it turned out this dude is actually a weirdo, because I definitely think this man has some skeletons, and his closet that he hasn't come out of yet, right? Apparently. So, you know, I mean, this is also why I believe that Democrats will not win, right? Even if things don't immediately get better when it comes to the Trump administration, you talk about the polls and stuff like that. The fact is that the Democrat Party has become so feminine that I think it's impossible for them to win over men, right? Like, I just do not believe that men are ever going to sign up for the Tim Walz AOC ticket, right? Because I think that's what's coming, right? I really think that's what's coming. I think that Tim Walz is positioning himself as a VP, right? Hey, I am a submissive man. I'm already telling the women that I'm not a threat. I'm not trying to get in your way. I'm just trying to play my role. And I really do believe that he wants to be VP. I think that he likes that role, right, of the man that takes a back seat to the woman, right, that supports the woman, debater. I want to say something else, right? I want to take it a little bit further, right? He's the type of dude that hangs out with his wife's boyfriend and doesn't think that it's weird for them to take naps together occasionally, right? So, you know, I just don't think that Tim Walz is the type of guy that would ever rally a man or men around the Democrat Party. I think that people like AOC, the Tim Walz, the Kamalas, they repel men, right? And if Democrats can't win over men, then they can't win, right? Unless it gets to the point where, like, women just, like, refuse to vote Republican, right? I don't know. I just think that this really appeals to a niche audience of liberal white women who are single, right? Because if you look at the women who are married, okay, you look at men that are married, men that are single, right? If you look across those demographics, they mainly vote Republican, right? It's the single white women that overwhelmingly vote for liberals, or single women overwhelmingly vote for liberals. And I think that is who these people are appealing to. And that's what they think about when they think about masculinity, right? They're not actually really trying to appeal to what men want from leadership, but rather what liberal women want men to want in leadership, right? That is what they're trying to appeal to. And I think that is a good summary of Tim Walz, right? And why he is still around, even though he clearly is not effective. The Democrats are too blinded by their own ideology, being so out of touch with regular, normal, everyday people, that they don't understand that Tim Walz talking, the more he talks, the worse that it gets for Democrats if they're trying to win back men. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.